All right, today we're talking with Marine veteran Jay Hodge from Jay Hodge and Associates, which is a lean operations consulting company. Jay, before we get to talking about your vast experience in the corporate world after you got out of the Marine Corps, take us back and tell us what you did in the Marine Corps.
All right, Joe. Well, and thank you for having me on today. I was an avionics, electronics, weapon systems technician for FA-18 aircraft. So I got to have some fun. I know there's a bunch of people out there, even Marines, thinking, "Oh, you were air wing." So yeah, I was air wing. Um, so I worked on the special weapon systems. The FLIRs, the missiles, the navigation, communication systems, and I was the guy that everybody made fun of because you're air winger. But the interesting thing about air wing is they all made fun of us until they needed some air support, and then we were their best friends, so it's okay.
That's right. We don't, you know how they always rotate sergeant majors around, like
Yeah.
when like a lot of people don't realize like you can become a sergeant major pretty young and then you just go from sergeant major job to sergeant major job at
Hmm.
they try to run you through the ground side, the logistics side, the aviation side, and then you go from smaller unit up to bigger unit over the years.
Hmm.
But we had a sergeant major one time who'd been around his whole life, and he's like, we always make fun of the air wing, but I tell you what, you guys sure do work a lot. You guys are always busy trying to keep
There's
those
no
aircraft
doubt.
in the air.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah, you guys may not PT as much as we do, but you sure do work a lot.
Yes, for sure.
You drive him
Long
nuts
hair.
that he couldn't just walk throughout the squadron and start tasking people with things. Sorry, Major, man, he's fixing that engine. You can't get in the middle of that. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So
Uh,
so talk to us about your transition out of the Marine Corps, and you ended up working for a number of big companies in the civilian sector after that.
I did. So I spent 5 years with the MOS I was in. You had to do a 5-year commitment because the training took so long. Um, my last 2.5 years, I was in Washington, D.C. at Andrews Air Force Base, which was kind of an interesting experience being in between a couple Air Force squadrons. We got along okay, but we had fun with them. Let's just say that. But it was interesting because I realized about a year before the end of my 5th year that I wasn't going to be re-upping, um, and so it was kind of a weird transition because then you have to start preparing. And most of my training, I went from high school to Euro College into the Marine Corps, and it was a weird transition. Not a weird transition, it was an interesting transition, but it was kind of nervous. It made me kind of nervous because most of my training came from the Marine Corps, a year or more of training, and trying to figure out what I wanted to do when I get out. So I loved airport operations, aircraft operations, but I didn't think that was something that I wanted to do for the rest of my career. And I actually tested and trained as an air traffic controller before I got out, and I tested with the FAA, and I did really well. But that's when President Clinton came back in and reinserted all of the air traffic controllers that President Reagan had let go because they had gone on strike. So there was that possibility.
Huh.
Um, yeah, so that was kind of disheartening. When I got out of the Marines, I had a wife and 2 kids. The transition was weird because you go from a situation where everybody's on the same team, you're all pointed in the same direction, and you know what I try and tell people in the corporate environment is that just because you're in a squadron with a bunch of other Marines doesn't mean you like every single one of them. You have personal differences, but the difference is that you take a bullet for any one of them, and you jump into the to a corporate world, and it's not the same. So I struggled for a while with the rigidity of the schedule, with knowing what our objective was, knowing what our goal was, all being on the same page. I ended up becoming a deputy in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and I did that for a little less than a year, and realized that I wanted to finish my degree. And so, you know, I give the Marine Corps a lot of credit for the fact that it created a level of determination and a level of, I've got to do this. It's going to be hard. It's going to take 3.5 years with a wife, 2 kids, a dog, living in a 576 square foot apartment. But that's nothing compared to some of the stuff we did in the Marine. So we could do it. And, my wife and I, and 2 kids, we lived in Laramie, Wyoming for 3.5 years in a small apartment, getting me through school. And it was absolutely worth it. It was difficult at times. We had nothing. My wife and I used to put the kids to bed and go get a couple crunchy tacos, and that would be our date night. We'd sit in front of the TV and watch an old movie or something. That was date night. That's all the money we had.
Mm-hmm.
But the Marine Corps prepared me for that. And I give the Marine Corps a lot of credit, because just because something's hard doesn't mean it's not worth doing. And the interesting thing is that delayed gratification is something that I think the Marine Corps taught me. Is, it takes a while to get good at anything. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of determination. It takes a lot of pain, to be honest, to get good at anything. But working through it, and just having the perspective that I know that I'm 3 years away from graduating college, but I know that once I graduate college, or I know that once I graduate this trade school, or once I complete this certification, I'm in a whole different world, and I'm pointed in the direction I want to go. I give the Marine Corps a lot of credit for getting that mindset in my mind. So it was an interesting transition.
Yeah, that's awesome. So after you finished your degree, what were some of the first steps in the civilian world? As far as, were you actually still working somewhat when you're in school, and then what changed when you finally graduated?
Yeah, I was in the Army National Guard for the 3 years while I was in college, so I still participated and was drilling and all that. And I had a part-time job, and my wife worked part-time. But I think, the weirdest thing when I transitioned is that the going from a military background to a civilian background, this isn't a negative comment, but I had to understand that 99% of the people I was working with didn't have that military background, didn't have that level of not dedication and loyalty, but that level of determination. In the Marine Corps, you didn't complain about anything because complaining didn't do any good.
Mm-hmm.
You get into a civilian world, sometimes you hear a lot of complaining, and it took me a while to realize that sometimes I had to look past that, because a lot of the people that I worked with, they didn't have the same background. Getting everybody, understanding that everybody's not pointing in the same direction was tough for me. And I've talked with a lot of military people who have struggled with the exact same thing. As you go to work and you've got a mission in the military. You've got a mission. This is what we're going to accomplish. In the civilian life, you find that there's 1,000 missions, because as individuals, I want to go here, and I want to go there, and I want to go there, and I want to go there. Whereas in the military, we're all going here, period. And it took a while for me to understand that. But the interesting thing is, once I understood that, it allowed me to kind of open my mind and realize that just because everybody's not in the military or doesn't have military experience doesn't mean that they don't have the same desires and passions about what they do. And it was just built a little different, I guess, in their minds.
Right.
So.
Yeah, that's a great observation. Well, hold that thought for a second, Jay. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Hey, back talking with Marine veteran Jay Hodge and Associates. So, Jay, before the break, you and your wife and your kids, you'd made it through college as somebody got out of the Marine Corps and working for the Army Guard in the meantime to make ends meet. What was your first big boy job with the big new fancy college degree?
Well, I wouldn't call it big and fancy, because I was a brand new college graduate. So you start where everybody else starts. I left college and started working for Ford Finance, but I wouldn't consider them my first job that kind of defined my career. I think the first job that defined my career is we moved back to Indiana, and I took a position as a branch manager for a company called Valon Safety Supply. And that quickly turned into, about 6 months later, a regional manager position. I think that was probably my first role that started to define my career. My passion is operations, always has been. You know, you look at the aircraft operations, man, it is nonstop, go, go, go. I was on an aircraft carrier for 6 weeks. Man, you talk about nonstop. It is nonstop, and you are always at the edge just to make sure you're aware. But I love operations. I love the complexity of operations, how everything works together. And that was really, I guess, the beginning, and allowed me, it put me into a position where I could use the leadership training from the Marine Corps, and use it with people that hadn't been in the military. And it was a change in thinking, because, you know, I got out as a corporal, but even as a corporal, you know, you've got this group of people that you're directing, on second shift or third shift, first shift, whatever. And you say, this is what we need to do. Let's do it. People just do it. In the civilian world, people want to understand why a lot more. In the Marine Corps, do it. It's done. In a civilian world, you know, you have to motivate, you have to engage people, you have to help them understand the big picture, because someone who's, you know, doing a clerical job, or someone who's working in the warehouse, they see that this is my world, this is all I do. But as a leader, one of our jobs, or my job, was to help them understand that how your role impacts the world, impacts everything that we do as an organization. So I would consider that one my first real leadership, career development, job, and I enjoyed it immensely.
Yeah. I mean, the military certainly does not have a monopoly on leadership by any means, but
No.
I think the military puts more time, energy, and training and money into emphasizing leadership on a daily basis. Like, especially in the Marine
Yes.
Corps and operational areas of the Marine Corps, it's lead leadership. It's just like, sometimes that's the only thing you ever talk about is leadership. Sometimes you actually get sick of hearing it.
Right.
And I mean, it's just drilled into you all the time, everything in your day-to-day routine, and constant, phenomenally great reminders of leadership. And
Yep.
sometimes we learn more from bad leadership than we do from good leadership. And, you know, like, not every leader in the Marine Corps is great by any means. And I probably learned more from bad leadership than I did from good. But nonetheless, there's that constant emphasis, that constant focus, all the way down to the PFC level of, you need to lead. You're
Right.
leading the Marines. You need to lead. And in the civilian sector, um, civilians, everybody recognizes good leadership, regardless of whether you're in the military or you spent your time on the civilian side. Everybody recognizes good leadership really quick. So
Right.
the definition of leadership is no different on the military side versus the civilian side. We tend to lead with a lot more sticks in the military than we do carrots. And then the civilian, you're constantly dangling carrots but it's still leadership. Leadership
It is.
is, doing what needs to be done in order to get the job done. And so if you got to
Right.
pull out a bag of carrots on the civilian side, then that's what you do. So, as you progressed through your civilian career, talk a little bit about some of the other companies you worked for and how you started to adapt your military experience into the civilian world.
Sure. So, I went from Valon Safety Supply. I took a leadership role at General Motors on the production side in a, Marion, Indiana, a metal fabrication plant. I was a shift supervisor. And um, you know, it's interesting because you go from the military side, where people do what you say because you said to do it, to working for General Motors, which is a union side, a union environment, which is a whole new aspect of the civilian lifestyle, or civilian, perspective. Because then you become, you know, the unions are known for being very difficult. And what I found is that unions are just made up of people, a lot of people that want to do a really good job, and helping them understand, you know, how important they are to the organization is actually a really effective way to getting them to become engaged. So General Motors was great for me simply because it forced me to understand how people think and how people operate. Because, like I said, at the base level, almost every human being wants to be successful at what they do, whether union, whether they're not union, whether manufacturing, whether they're healthcare, whether they're military, whether they're doing some civilian job. They want to be successful at what they do. There's an internal pride that comes with being successful at what you do. And what I've found is that when people find what they're passionate about, they tend to be much more successful. And I think that's why, I've been blessed. Any success that I've had, I give to God and I give to my wife and family, simply because without their support, I wouldn't be successful. But I think some of the success that I've seen in my career is because I found what I'm passionate about, and I think that's almost the pinnacle. You find what you're passionate about, and you'll work the long hours, you'll work through the pain and the suffering, you'll do whatever it takes to be quote unquote successful.
Yeah. And so with a lean consulting company, obviously in operations, you got into lean, you were involved in lean manufacturing and eventually got out into the consulting business. What's lean all about? I mean, most of us have heard about it, but what is operating in a lean way truly all about, and where does that come from?
That's a great question because a lot of people misunderstand lean. So I spent years at Toyota. So what's weird is when I left General Motors, I was teaching General Motors the Toyota production system. And then I went to work for Toyota. So, hey, worked out well. But lean is a mistaken perception that lean is about reducing waste in a process. And it is. And when we talk about processes, I'm not talking about manufacturing. I'm not talking about healthcare. I'm not talking about military. I'm talking about processes. When I talk about processes, it applies to everything because name one thing that's not a process. You can't.
Mm-hmm.
Everything we do is a process. Thinking about what's not a process is a process. This podcast is a process. Listening to this podcast is a process. If you're in the military and you're thinking about what you want to do in 6 months when you get out, that's a process. Going to college is a process. Everything we do is a process. So when you look at lean is about understanding the processes and reducing the waste, but reducing the waste to increase the value that we derive or provide to our patients or customers. Toyota, their objective is not to be number one in the industry. Their objective is to produce the best car, which makes you, as the consumer, want to buy a Toyota every time you buy a car. It's not about producing the car. It's about producing a car that creates loyalty so that you buy the car the next time. And so that's really what lean is about. And it applies to everything we do. It's kind of like if you take a piece of steak, or you go to the supermarket and you buy steak and you buy this packet and it's got 4 steaks in it. You get home, you take the steaks off. The first steak looks great. The second steak's got a little more fat. You get down to the 4th steak, it's got this huge vein of fat on it. Well, you paid for that fat. There's no value in that fat whatsoever. So you're probably not real happy. And they put it on the 4th level so you wouldn't see it on purpose. So you're not happy about the fat. There's no value in the fat unless you like to eat fat, which isn't real healthy, but hey, everyone has their own. So that's really what lean is about. It's about understanding our processes and designing them so that they produce the most value possible.
Yeah, that's awesome. So talk about how you were able to get into the consulting business and how you started from there, because that's really where your entrepreneurial venture begins, is where you went out on your own as a consultant.
Right. It is. So when I left Toyota, once you have the Toyota name on your resume, you become somewhat of a commodity because everyone understands Toyota is Toyota and they want to implement it, whether it's in healthcare. Caterpillar called me and they asked me if I would come help them implement like the Toyota production system in their supply base, because what Caterpillar realized is that they could become as good as they possibly could. But if they could take their suppliers and help them become even better, it made Caterpillar better, a better company. And so I started to work for Caterpillar, and then I got a call from a friend who was working in healthcare. And anybody listening to this knows that healthcare has a bunch of opportunities out there to get better. If you've ever sat in a waiting room for 35 minutes, waiting for an appointment that took 5 minutes. You realize that the 35 minutes of waiting in the waiting room had no value whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to work for healthcare, and the opportunities are endless. So I've been working in the healthcare and both manufacturing for the last 5 years. I started my company 5 years ago, simply because, like I said before, lean is my passion. Helping companies improve is my passion. Walking in and helping a leader understand what real leadership looks like and how to use it and how to understand and how to engage and motivate and inspire their people to go from average to above average, to go from ordinary to extraordinary. That's my passion. If you look in my office, you're not going to see a bunch of trophies and plaques that people have given me. That's not what for me, it's not what it's about. My passion is getting a call 2 years down the road from a brand new VP who said, hey man, I just it went from a director to a VP role, and I wanted to thank you because you are a part of that. For me, that's the trophies, and they're not something you put on the wall. There's something inside of here, because that's success for me, to be honest.
So, what are some of the things you first do when you start talking with a new client on trying to implement lean into their business processes?
The very first thing I do with any company is I sit down with the CEO and president, and I make a bold statement. I said, we're going to do this, and I asked them, where do you want to go? This is where you are, but tell me where you want to go. Because if you haven't identified what you want to look like 1 year, 5 year, 10 years from now, I can't help you get there if you don't know where you want to go. So I always ask them, where do you want to go? And then I say specifically, are you willing to be part of this? The reason I have this conversation is because a lot of leaders out there, not good leaders, let me emphasize that, will say, I want us to go from here to there, and I want to delegate it to someone for someone to get us there. I'm like, that doesn't work. It won't work. If you look at a ship has one captain, and the captain says, we're going in that direction right there. The XO and everybody else can say, well, I really like to go over there, but the captain says we're going there. So if the CEO or president in a company is not willing to be part of the transformation, whether it be a cultural or operational, if they're not willing to be part of that transformation and be involved in it on a daily basis, I won't take the engagement. I won't work with them, because I know that if a CEO is here, I've got 5 or 6 senior leaders under them, and if they're not following a direction that person gives them, then I'm going to have an entire organization going in 5 different directions. So that's the very first place I start with any company.
Is it pretty common to get pushback from some of the lower level leadership on down to any of the folks you end up interacting with?
And it's not uncommon at all. And the reason it's not uncommon is because of what everybody has probably referred to or heard, the flavor of the month. This year comes out, we throw some new banners on the wall, we throw out some handouts, we shoot out some emails, and all of a sudden we're excited about what we're going to do this year. It's different than last year. It's going to be different. We don't know why it's going to be different, but it's going to be different because the colors are different and the slogan's different. And so the reason that I get pushback is because people become accustomed to every year, every 2 year, we have a different initiative, and they know that this initiative is going to get washed away with the next group of leadership or with the next level of motivation or next time they plateau and we can't figure out how to get to that next level. Well, let's try a different initiative. And so they know that if they just live life and kind of jump on board, that it'll go away pretty soon. So it's not as much pushback as it is engagement and belief. And you can't really, in the Marines, they motivated as Semper Fi, the few, the proud. I mean, we're Marines. We're willing to walk into the face of battle because we're Marines. That's what we do. And you're inspired. You wear the dress blues, and face it, ain't nothing looking much better than a Marine in dress blues. And it's pretty motivating. So you have to figure out how to do that in a leadership environment in a large scale company where you've got thousands of people that have their own idea of what success looks like.
So what other experiences can you talk with us about as far as initially breaking into the consulting industry? Like when you can't just go out on as a consultant tomorrow and all of a sudden have clients.
No.
Were you able to work into that smoothly while you were still employed, or did you just take the jump?
Well, I have a very large network, and for some unknown reason, which I still can't figure out, I have a fairly decent reputation. Seriously, I don't know how, because I look at myself and I think, oh my gosh, I would never hire you. But evidently, I've got a decent reputation. And so when I made the decision, I was working for a healthcare company, and they were going through some transitions. And so I saw the writing on the wall, and I said, you know what? And I've had people over the years say, you should start your own company. You should do this for yourself. And I looked at my wife one day and I said, hey, you want to do this? Because if she wasn't on board, I wasn't going to do it, because we're a team. We've been married for 33 years and we're still a successful team. And I give her all the credit for that. But no, I made the decision to go ahead and start my own company. And 2 months later, I had my first contract. And it was people that I had worked with over the years. And that's one of the critical things for me when I look back in retrospect, hindsight is amazing, is that every interaction you have, and this is important for people coming out of the military to understand, is that every interaction you have leaves an impression. And so you may have a conversation with someone on a plane, you may have a conversation with someone in the supermarket, it's someone at church, someone at the soccer game where your kids are playing soccer. Every interaction leaves an impression, and the impression that you leave is up to you. And so I guess the impression and some of my experience and some of the historical performance had carried along. And once I went out on my own, people were like, hey, we would like to have you come work with us. So
let's talk about your book, The Lean Treasure Chest.
Yes. Oh, you want me to actually talk about it? I wrote, it's 386 pages. It's actually, people look at this and think, oh my gosh, that's 386 pages. Believe it or not, it's actually a very easy read. I wrote this book. I kind of alluded to it a second ago when I said lean is misunderstood, and it is. Lean is applicable in personal lives. It's applicable in healthcare, manufacturing, service industries, absolutely the military. And oh, please, someone from the United States government call me and say we need to implement lean in the government, because we really, 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 really do.
That one.
Yeah. But lean is, the reason I wrote the book is so that people would understand that lean applies to everything. You can use it to organize your garage. You can use it to organize your finances. My wife and I have used lean principles to pay for our kids' college. We've used it to plan for retirement. I've used it in manufacturing. She uses it in her kitchen and throughout the house. It's about creating an environment of success. And I wrote it so that people, whether you're a CEO, whether you're a director, whether you're a manager, whether you're someone who's doing a podcast, whether you're a person who's turning the bolts on the vehicle on the assembly line, the concepts apply to you. And it shows people how to use them in your specific role. So it's not just pointed towards the CEO. It's not just pointed towards the director. It's not just pointed towards the nurse. It's pointed to anybody who does anything, because everything's a process.
Yeah, that's awesome. So talk to us a little bit about the mechanics and the discipline required to actually start and finish a book.
Whew. How much time do we have again?
Can you sum it up in one or two sentences?
You know what? Writing a book, I firmly believe that everybody could write a book. I give the Marine Corps credit here again. It took me 3 years to write the book. I'm actually on my third book. I wrote a book 2006 called Photos of Fatherhood. It's about fatherhood. I've just started my third book about a month and a half ago. With writing a book, you have to understand that you have something to add. I'm not an expert. I don't think there is such a thing as an expert in the world, because an expert means that you know all there is to know about something. There are no experts, in my opinion. There was only one expert, and that was Jesus. That's just my opinion. But to write a book, you have to be willing to understand that you're going to learn a lot while you write that book. You're going to understand a lot more about what you're writing about when you're done than when you started.
Well,
If
that's
that
great.
makes sense.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I always like to say, hey, every veteran's got a book inside of them somewhere.
Hmm.
It's just a matter of sitting down and
Absolutely.
doing it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you
Well,
always have to keep you have to keep the people that are going to read it, you have to keep thinking about it from their perspective. How could I say this so that it would make more sense to them? And that takes a different way of thinking.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jay, we're getting close to the end of our time here. I do want to give you the last word. So first of all, where can we find your book? I assume on Amazon and anywhere else great books
Yeah.
are sold. Yeah. And,
Yeah, it's on Amazon, it's on Audible, Kindle, all those.
okay, great. Um, also, if you're talking to somebody who's still in the military looking to get out and get into entrepreneurship, what kind of advice would you have for them?
Find your passion. Find your passion. Understand what your passion is, and don't be afraid to try something and realize that's not your passion, because it took me 3 or 4 different attempts to really understand what my passion was. So just find your passion. It may take a while, but once you do it, chase it like there's no tomorrow.
Awesome. I do have one final question. Since you're a consultant, is Office Space one of your favorite movies?
Yeah, yeah. I got my stapler right here. No one's taking it, man. So
uh, so did you fire him? No, we just fixed the glitch. One of my best friends is a consultant. He watches that movie all the time. It's
Oh
hilarious.
yeah.
All right, had to ask. All right, Marine, appreciate it. We look forward to your future success, and hopefully we'll have you back on the show sometime in the future when you've moved on to your next level.
Sounds great. Thank you, Joe. I appreciate it. Thank you for everything you do.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Hoorah. Take care.
Hoorah.
These two
Bye-bye.
Marines are Oscar Mike.